The smell of warm bread and cooked rice filled the school cafeteria every morning. Maya arrived before the sun came up, her old shoes tapping softly on the tiled floor as she pushed open the heavy kitchen door. She wore the same white apron she had used for years, carefully washed but faded at the edges, and a hairnet that kept her curls tucked neatly away. To most students, she was just the lunch lady. Maya's work was not glamorous. She cut vegetables, stirred giant pots, and served food to hundreds of children who walked past her line every day. Some students gave her a smile, a thank you, or a polite nod. But many barely noticed her. A few even mocked her. They laughed at her wide frame, the way she hummed old songs while she worked, or the way her shoes squeaked when she hurried across the kitchen floor. "She sings like she's in a cartoon," one boy whispered once, making his friends laugh. Another student, pointing at her worn apron, said, "Does she even own anything new?" Maya heard them, but she never responded. Instead, she smiled gently, her eyes soft but tired. She had learned long ago that silence could be stronger than anger. Still, their words stung, like tiny cuts that never fully healed. What nobody knew was that Maya carried a world of experience behind her quiet face. She had once been a bright student herself, full of ideas and dreams. Life, however, had not been kind. Family struggles, financial problems, and unexpected tragedies had pushed her into difficult jobs. She chose the cafeteria because it was steady, honest work that allowed her to stand on her own feet. She took pride in feeding children, even if they did not respect her. One cool autumn morning, the school gathered in the assembly hall. The principal, a tall man with glasses, spoke with great excitement. "This year," he announced, "we will host a community challenge. It will not be a simple project. It will be about solving something real, something important. We are calling it the impossible task." Whispers ran through the hall. Students leaned forward, curious. Parents and teachers in the audience listened closely. The principal explained, "Our town has been struggling with a major problem. The water supply has been polluted. Engineers have studied it for years, but solutions are too expensive. We want our community to think creatively. Anyone may take part: students, parents, even staff. Whoever finds a practical answer will help not only our school, but the entire town." Excitement filled the room. Students dreamed of fame and prizes. Teachers talked about guiding their classes. Parents exchanged hopeful looks. At the very back of the hall, Maya stood silently, holding her apron in her hands. She listened carefully. The problem was familiar to her. For months, she too had struggled with the dirty water at home. She had seen neighbors complain, children fall ill, and families spend money they did not have on bottled water. Unlike others, she had quietly experimented in her small kitchen, mixing natural ingredients, testing filters, and writing notes in an old notebook. Nobody knew, because nobody had ever asked her opinion. As the crowd left the hall, laughter and chatter filled the air. A group of students walked past Maya. One of them said loudly, "Imagine if Maya joins the challenge. She'll try to fix the water with her cooking spoon." His friends burst into laughter. Maya did not flinch. She held her notebook tighter inside her bag. Her heart beat faster, but not with anger, with determination. That evening, she sat at her small wooden table in her modest home. The kitchen light flickered softly above her. She opened the notebook, its pages filled with sketches, notes, and formulas. Her fingers traced the drawings of a simple filter she had designed using common materials. She whispered to herself, "Maybe they will laugh, maybe they won't believe. But if I can make this work, no one will go thirsty again." The next morning, Maya returned to school as usual. She cooked, she served, she smiled. But deep inside, a quiet fire was burning. For years she had been invisible, treated as if she had nothing more to offer than a plate of food. Now, she had a chance not to prove herself to the children who mocked her, but to help the people who needed it most. The world saw her as the lunch lady. But behind that apron stood a woman who had lived, suffered, learned, and dreamed. A woman ready to face the impossible. And though the halls still echoed with laughter, Maya walked forward with silent strength, carrying a secret that would soon change everything. The school buzzed with excitement about the challenge. Posters were pinned to the walls with bold letters, "The impossible task: solve the water crisis." Students carried notebooks filled with ideas. Teachers encouraged their classes to research. Parents formed groups and exchanged plans. Everyone wanted to be remembered as the one who found the solution. In the middle of this excitement, Maya continued her daily work. She stirred steaming pots, cut vegetables, and served meals with her usual soft smile. But inside her heart, she carried a secret hope. She wanted to join the challenge. She wanted to share the design she had worked on quietly for months. Still, doubts filled her mind. She was not an engineer. She was not a teacher. She was a lunch lady. The thought repeated in her head, will anyone even listen? Will they laugh again? One afternoon, as the cafeteria line thinned, Maya pulled out her old notebook and opened it carefully on the counter. The pages were filled with neat sketches and notes. She had drawn a system using charcoal, sand, and cloth layers. She had even added ideas for how to build it cheaply with everyday materials. A small voice startled her. "What's that?" Maya quickly closed the notebook. A young girl, Amina, stood in front of her with a lunch tray. Unlike most children, Amina always greeted Maya kindly. "It's just some notes," Maya said gently. Amina tilted her head. It looked like a machine. "Are you joining the challenge?" Maya hesitated. Her lips curved into a shy smile. "Maybe." The girl's eyes lit up. "You should. I think you can do it. My father said sometimes the smartest ideas come from the simplest people." The words warmed Maya's heart. For the first time, she felt a spark of courage. The following week, the school library was opened after hours for anyone who wanted to work on the challenge. Groups gathered around tables with laptops, charts, and piles of books. Parents and teachers spoke in serious tones. Students argued over designs and diagrams. Maya walked in quietly, clutching her notebook. The room grew hushed. Some eyes turned toward her, surprised to see the lunch lady among them. A boy whispered loudly to his friend, "What's she doing here? Is she going to cook the water clean?" The group laughed. Maya's cheeks warmed, but she did not turn back. She walked to an empty table and placed her notebook down. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. She began to write, ignoring the whispers around her. As the evening went on, she sketched improvements to her design. She wrote down measurements for water flow and estimated how much dirty water her filter could clean each hour. While others debated expensive machines and chemical solutions, Maya focused on simple, affordable materials that every family could find. But the whispers never stopped. Two parents passed by her table, shaking their heads. "This is serious work," One muttered. She's wasting her time. Maya pressed her pen harder against the page. She told herself, they don't know me. They don't know what I can do. At home, her kitchen became her workshop. She filled bottles with muddy water from the tap and poured them through layers of cloth, sand, and charcoal she had arranged inside a container. She watched carefully, noting how much cleaner the water looked at the other end. She tasted none of it. Safety came first, but she smelled it, studied its clarity, and compared it with bottled water. Slowly, she adjusted her design, layer by layer. Nights grew long. While others slept, Maya sat under her flickering kitchen light, working patiently. Her hands grew rough from washing buckets and filtering mud. Her notebook filled with new pages of calculations. The soft humming she carried in the cafeteria followed her here, keeping her steady as she worked. Still, she faced moments of weakness. One night, staring at the half-clean water in her bottle, she whispered, "Maybe I am foolish. Maybe I cannot do this." Tears gathered in her eyes. The laughter of students and parents echoed in her memory. But then she remembered Amina's hopeful face and her words, "Sometimes the smartest ideas come from the simplest people." The tears dried, and determination returned. She would not give up. The day of the first presentation drew closer. Each participant was expected to explain their idea before a small panel of teachers and community leaders. Maya signed her name on the list. When the sheet was posted, students crowded around it. "Look at this," one boy said, pointing at her name. "The lunch lady thinks she's a scientist now." Laughter spread like wildfire. Yet, behind her calm expression, Maya's heart grew stronger. She whispered to herself, "Let them laugh. The truth will speak louder than their voices." As she walked back to the cafeteria, her notebook pressed firmly against her chest, she knew the road ahead would not be easy. But she also knew something greater: she was no longer invisible. The whispers had turned into doubts, the doubts into fire, and the fire into strength. Soon, the whole town would see that the woman in the kitchen was not just serving food, she was preparing to serve hope. And the first step would come at the presentation, where every eye would finally be forced to look at her. The school auditorium was filled with nervous chatter and shuffling papers. Students, parents, and staff had gathered for the first round of presentations. Each participant would step on stage and explain their idea for solving the water crisis. The judges, 2 teachers, 1 local engineer, and the town mayor sat at a long table in front. Their pens were ready, eyes sharp. Maya stood at the back of the room, holding her notebook close. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face stayed calm. She wore her cleanest apron, not because she wanted to remind people she was a lunch lady, but because it made her feel like herself. One by one, groups and individuals stepped forward. A team of students presented a plan involving chemical treatment, complete with colorful slides. The judges nodded politely, though one of them whispered something about the cost being too high. Next, a group of parents displayed a blueprint for a large machine. It looked powerful and technical, but again the engineer frowned. "Too expensive," he said softly, making a note on his paper. Then came a teacher, who had designed a system with electronic sensors. The mayor asked, "Can villagers afford this?" The teacher hesitated, unable to answer. The atmosphere grew tense. The problem was clear: many ideas were clever, but none were realistic for a small town with limited money. Finally, the host called, "Maya, the lunch lady." Whispers filled the hall. A boy snickered, "Here we go. Soup and spoons." Some laughed, Others leaned forward with curiosity. Maya walked slowly to the stage. She placed her notebook on the podium and looked at the audience. For a brief moment, fear tightened her chest. She remembered all the times she had been ignored, all the laughter behind her back. But then she thought of Amina's hopeful eyes, of the sick children in her neighborhood, and of the muddy water she had poured into bottles night after night. Her voice was soft but steady. "Good evening. I know many of you see me only as the lunch lady. But today, I am here as someone who cares deeply about our water and about our children's health." The room grew quiet. Some students stopped whispering. Maya opened her notebook and held it up. "I have been testing a design for a filter made with things we all have: sand, charcoal, and cloth. These layers can clean water without chemicals or machines. It is simple, safe, and cheap. Anyone in town can build it." She lifted a clear bottle from her bag. Inside was water she had poured through her homemade filter. The liquid sparkled under the stage lights. "This water came from the same dirty tap we all use. I tested it. It is not perfect yet, but it is safe to drink. And it costs almost nothing to make." The audience stirred. The mayor leaned forward. The engineer adjusted his glasses. A few students gasped quietly. But then, from the back, a boy shouted, "It's just a trick. She probably bought that water from the store." Laughter followed. Maya did not flinch. She looked directly at the judges. "I know some will not believe me. That is why I brought my filter here. If you allow me, I will show you how it works." The engineer nodded eagerly. "Please, demonstrate." Maya opened another bottle of muddy water. The audience watched as she poured it carefully through her filter, a simple plastic container layered with cloth, sand, and crushed charcoal. The water dripped slowly into a clear glass beneath. Drop by drop, the brown liquid turned into a lighter, cleaner stream. The room fell silent as everyone leaned closer. When the glass was half full, Maya held it up. The difference was visible. The engineer walked over, examined it, and even used a small test strip he carried in his pocket. His eyes widened. "This is impressive," he said. "The contaminants are greatly reduced. It is not a complete solution, but it is affordable, practical, and effective for households." The mayor smiled. "Remarkable." A teacher whispered, "How did she think of this?" Maya lowered her eyes humbly. "I grew up in a place where clean water was rare. I watched my mother use natural materials to make water safer for us. I improved her method through trial and error in my kitchen. I may not be an engineer, but I know what it means to need clean water." Silence hung in the room for a long moment. Then, slowly, the audience began to clap. First a few hands, then more, until the hall filled with applause. Some students who had laughed earlier now looked down in shame. Amina, sitting near the front, clapped the loudest, her face glowing with pride. For the first time, Maya stood on the stage not as the lunch lady but as a woman whose voice mattered. Her idea was simple, but it carried power, the power of experience, love, and quiet determination. When she left the stage, whispers followed again, but this time they were different. No one mocked. Instead, voices murmured with respect, surprise, and even admiration. Maya walked back to her seat, holding her notebook close. Her heart felt lighter than it had in years. She knew this was only the beginning. There would be more tests, more doubts, more challenges. But she also knew something else: she was no longer invisible. And soon, the whole town would realize that the woman they once laughed at had the courage to solve what others had called impossible. The days after the presentation were filled with whispers and discussions. People in town could not stop talking about Maya, the lunch lady who had stood before everyone and shown them a solution they had not expected. Some called her brave. Others called her lucky. A few still doubted, whispering that her filter was nothing more than a clever trick. The judges had been impressed, but they were careful too. They announced, "Before we declare any solution useful, it must pass real tests. We cannot risk people's health with half answers." Maya understood. She nodded quietly, her notebook in her hands. She had never asked for blind belief, only for the chance to prove what she had built. One cool morning, the school arranged a demonstration in the open yard. Tables were set up with bottles of muddy water taken directly from the polluted stream. Parents, students, and even local reporters gathered to watch. Maya stood by her filter, which she had built larger and stronger than before. Layers of cloth, sand, gravel, and charcoal filled the container. A clear bucket waited at the bottom to collect the filtered water. The engineer stepped forward. "Maya, today we will test your design in front of everyone. Are you ready?" Her heart beat fast, but she nodded. Yes. The crowd pressed closer. Children balanced on tiptoes, and parents shaded their eyes from the sun. The engineer poured a bucket of brown, smelly water into the top of Maya's filter. Slowly, drop by drop, the water began to trickle down through the layers. The crowd leaned in, whispering as they watched the stream change from muddy to clear. Minutes passed. The bucket below began to fill with clean-looking water. Maya picked it up carefully, her hands steady though her nerves shook inside. The engineer dipped a testing strip and waited. All eyes were on him. He held it up. "The bacteria level is much lower. The water is safe for washing and close to safe for drinking. This is far better than many expected." The crowd gasped. Children clapped. Amina cheered loudly, her small hands slapping together. But not everyone smiled. A parent in the back raised his voice. "Close to safe is not good enough. My child cannot drink close to safe water. We need perfect results." Others murmured in agreement. Maya bowed her head slightly. She spoke softly but firmly. "I understand. My filter is not finished. It is not perfect. But it is something our families can build today, with no money, and it can make the water much safer while we wait for a bigger solution." Some nodded, appreciating her honesty. But others still frowned. Doubt remained heavy in the air. That night, Maya sat alone in her small kitchen. The applause from earlier echoed faintly in her ears, but the criticism felt louder. She poured another bottle of dirty water into her filter, watching it drip slowly through. She tasted none of it, only studied it carefully, comparing color and clarity. Her notebook lay open on the table. She scribbled notes: more layers, slower flow, finer sand. She circled words, crossed out old ideas, and wrote new ones. The flickering kitchen light shone on her face as she whispered, "I must make it safer. They must trust it. They must believe." The next day, Maya walked through town, carrying two bottles, one with dirty water, the other with water from her filter. Some people stopped her to ask questions. "Is it really safe?" a mother asked, holding her baby. Maya showed her the bottle. "It is not perfect yet, but it is better than nothing. With time, I can improve it." The mother nodded slowly. "Even better is something." Others were harsher. A man shook his head. I will not risk my family's health on a kitchen experiment. Maya did not argue. She only said, that is your choice. But I will keep working. Back at school, she found Amina waiting near the cafeteria. The little girl looked up at her with shining eyes. Don't give up, Maya. My father said when people doubt you, it means you are doing something big. The words touched Maya's heart. She smiled and gently patted the girl's shoulder. Thank you, child. I will not give up. Weeks passed. Maya worked harder than ever. She tested finer layers of sand. She found better ways to crush charcoal. She even studied books in the library, asking teachers for help with scientific terms she did not understand. Slowly, her filter grew more advanced, yet still simple enough for any family to build. The town watched her progress with mixed feelings. Some admired her courage. Others doubted. The laughter had quieted, but whispers of disbelief still followed her. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Maya stood outside her small house holding a clear bottle of water. It sparkled in the fading light. She whispered, soon, they will see. Not because I want to be right, but because our children deserve this. She pressed the bottle close to her chest. The road ahead was not easy, but the real test was just beginning. The town's eyes stayed fixed on Maya. Her filter had impressed many, but the doubts had not disappeared. Some believed in her, while others said she was wasting everyone's time. She is only a lunch lady, they muttered. She cannot fix something even scientists failed to solve. The weight of those words pressed on Maya's shoulders every day. Yet, when she walked into the cafeteria each morning, she still smiled as she ladled soup and served bread. She hummed softly, even though her mind was elsewhere thinking about layers of sand, measurements of charcoal, and the flow of water through her filter. After school, she returned to her small kitchen to continue testing. Her hands grew sore from lifting buckets, and her back ached from bending over for hours. Sometimes the water came out cloudy, and she would feel frustration rise in her chest. Why is it not working? She whispered to herself, her eyes tired. But she never allowed herself to stop. Each failure was written in her notebook, each mistake carefully studied. She told herself, if I keep going, the answer will come. One evening, the engineer who had judged the competition knocked on Maya's door. Surprised, she quickly wiped her hands on her apron and invited him inside. I came to see your work, he explained. His eyes scanned the buckets, bottles, and containers scattered across her kitchen. You have patience, Maya. I respect that. But you need better tools if you want this filter to succeed. He handed her a small bag. Inside were test strips, measuring cups, and a guidebook about water purification. Maya's eyes widened. You are helping me. He nodded. Science belongs to everyone. And sometimes, fresh eyes see what trained eyes miss. I believe in your heart, Maya. Now, let us see if we can make your idea even stronger. Gratitude filled Maya's chest. That night, with the engineer's tools, she measured her results more carefully. She discovered that slowing the water's flow made it cleaner. She adjusted the layers, packed the sand tighter, and crushed the charcoal more finely. Slowly, the water grew clearer, safer, and closer to drinkable purity. But while her work improved, challenges outside her home grew louder. Some townspeople accused her of pretending to be something she was not. She is not a scientist. How can we trust her with our lives? Others feared change. What if her filter fails? What if children get sick? It will be her fault. At the school, a few students still laughed when they saw her notebook. The lunch lady thinks she's saving the world, they teased. Maya heard every word, but she did not answer. Instead, she worked harder. She reminded herself, this is not about pride. This is about children who need clean water. One rainy afternoon, Amina appeared at Maya's door, her dress damp from the drizzle. She carried a small jar of muddy water. My mother said this is from our well, the girl said softly. She wants to know if you can make it clean. Maya looked into the girl's hopeful eyes. She took the jar, poured it through her filter, and waited. Slowly, the clear water filled the container below. She handed it back to Amina. The child smiled brightly. It looks so different. I will show my mother. That moment gave Maya strength. It reminded her why she had started, why she endured the laughter, the whispers, and the doubt. Weeks turned into months. The mayor announced that the town would hold a second demonstration. This time, the water would be tested officially in a laboratory. If Maya's filter passed, it could be shared with every household in the community. The pressure grew heavier. Maya spent every free moment improving her design. She even skipped meals sometimes, too focused on her work. Her hands cracked from handling wet sand and charcoal. Her eyes burned from late nights under the dim kitchen light. But in her heart, she carried hope. Every drop of clear water that filled her bottles whispered to her, "You are closer. Do not give up." The night before the demonstration, Maya stood alone in her kitchen. She looked at her final filter, built stronger than any before. Her notebook lay open, filled with months of effort, scribbles, numbers, and sketches that told the story of her journey. She placed her hand gently on it and whispered, "Tomorrow, they will see. Not because I want their praise, but because our children need this. Because no mother should fear giving her child a glass of water." The rain outside tapped softly against the window, as if the world itself was listening to her promise. And though doubt still lingered in the town, Maya was ready. Ready to face the next day, ready to face the critics, and ready to let her simple idea stand before the world as a beacon of hope. Her fight was not over, it was only reaching its most important moment. The morning of the demonstration arrived with a bright sun and cool air. The schoolyard had been prepared like a stage. Long tables were covered with glass containers, buckets of muddy water, and testing equipment borrowed from the town laboratory. Reporters set up cameras, ready to capture the event for the local news. Parents gathered with their children, and teachers whispered among themselves. The entire town seemed to be there. In the center stood Maya's filter, taller, stronger, and cleaner than before. It was built from simple materials, layers of sand, gravel, charcoal, and cloth, carefully arranged inside a large container. Beside it, Maya stood quietly, wearing her neat apron and holding her notebook close to her chest. Some students in the crowd giggled. "She really came dressed like a lunch lady," one whispered. Others smirked. But this time, their laughter sounded weaker, as if even they were unsure. The mayor raised his hand for silence. "Today, we will see if Maya's filter can truly make a difference. The water from our polluted stream will pass through it. Then, experts will test the results. If it works, this design could change lives in our community." The crowd grew still. Everyone's eyes fixed on Maya. The engineer stepped forward with a bucket of dark, muddy water. The smell made several children cover their noses. He poured it slowly into the top of the filter. The dirty liquid sank into the layers of sand and charcoal. Drop by drop, the water began to flow out at the bottom. It was clearer than before. Not perfectly crystal, but no longer brown. People leaned forward, murmuring. Maya kept her eyes steady on the bucket, though her hands trembled slightly. She whispered to herself, "Please work, please work." The glass filled halfway. The engineer handed it to the laboratory worker, who tested it carefully with strips and instruments. The crowd waited in silence, every second feeling longer than the last. Finally, the worker looked up. His voice carried across the yard, "The bacteria level is safe. The water is drinkable." Gasps swept through the crowd. A mother held her child closer, tears welling in her eyes. Students who had once mocked Maya stared wide-eyed. Teachers exchanged amazed looks. The mayor's face broke into a smile. But before joy could spread fully, one man shouted, "It's just one test. Maybe it's luck. Test it again." The mayor nodded. "We will test again." Another bucket of dirty water was poured. Again, the filter worked. Again, the results showed clean water, safe for drinking. This time, the applause began soft at first, then louder, until the whole yard rang with clapping and cheers. Maya stood still, her eyes filling with quiet tears. For years she had been invisible, mocked, and doubted. But now, before the entire town, her work spoke for itself. The mayor raised his voice. "Maya has shown us that great solutions do not always come from experts or books. They can come from patience, hard work, and love. Her filter is simple, affordable, and effective. This design will be shared with every family in our community." Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras flashed. People rushed forward to shake Maya's hand. Mothers thanked her, fathers praised her, and children looked at her with wide eyes, no longer laughing but admiring. Yet, in the middle of the celebration, Maya stayed humble. She bowed her head and said softly, "I am only one woman. I cannot fix everything. But if this filter helps even one child drink safely, then my work is worth it." Later that evening, the school cafeteria was quiet. The tables were empty, the pots clean. Maya sat alone with her notebook, staring at the worn pages filled with months of struggle. She thought of the long nights, the aching hands, and the tears she had shed when doubt felt too heavy. She whispered, "It was never about me. It was always about them, the children, the mothers, the families." Her thoughts were interrupted by a small knock at the door. Amina stepped inside, holding a small bottle of water. "This is from our well," the girl said, smiling. "My mother asked me to bring it. She wants me to pour it through your filter." Maya chuckled softly, wiping her eyes. "Of course." She helped Amina set the bottle into the filter, and together they watched the clear water drip out below. The girl's face shone with joy. "You did it, Maya. You really did it." Maya smiled, her heart warm. But deep inside, she knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of a bigger journey. Because solving one problem meant facing new challenges, spreading the filter, teaching others, and keeping the trust she had finally earned. For the first time in her life, Maya was not just the lunch lady. She was the woman who had solved the impossible. The days after the demonstration felt different in the town. For the first time in years, hope was no longer just a word people said, it was something they could touch, something they could taste in every drop of clean water. Maya's filter became the talk of the streets. Families came to her with questions, eager to build one for their own homes. The mayor arranged for the school auditorium to be used as a training center, where Maya could teach volunteers how to make the filter step by step. Soon, mothers, fathers, and even students gathered with buckets, sand, and charcoal, following her calm instructions. As she worked with them, Maya no longer wore only the white apron of a lunch lady. She wore the dignity of someone who had been doubted but proved stronger than doubt. Her hands, once mocked for holding ladles and spoons, now built the tools that saved lives. One evening, Maya walked home after a long day of teaching. The streets were quiet, the lamps glowing softly. Children played outside, holding bottles of clear water, their laughter ringing with joy. A woman stopped her along the way, pressing her hands together. "My son was always sick because of the dirty water," the woman said. "But yesterday, he drank from the filter. He smiled, Maya. He smiled without pain." "Thank you." Maya felt her heart swell. She had no grand reply, only a gentle nod and a soft, "It was not me alone, it was the hands of all of us together." At school, things also changed. The students who once laughed at her no longer whispered cruel jokes. Instead, they greeted her with respect. Some even stayed after lunch to help her clean the kitchen, hoping to learn something from her. One boy, who had been among the loudest to mock her, approached her shyly one afternoon. He looked at his shoes as he spoke. I'm sorry, Maya. I didn't know you were so smart. I thought you were just the lunch lady." Maya placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We are never just anything. Every person carries a story you cannot see. Remember that, always." The boy nodded, his eyes opening with a new understanding. News of Maya's invention began to spread beyond the town. A local newspaper printed her picture with the headline, "Lunch Lady Creates Solution to Save Hundreds." Soon, visitors from nearby villages came, asking her to teach them as well. She welcomed them all, never turning anyone away. Yet, despite the growing attention, Maya remained humble. In the evenings, she still cooked simple meals, hummed her old songs, and wrote in her notebook. She did not chase fame or riches. Her joy came from watching clean water flow, from seeing children healthy, from knowing that dignity had finally replaced laughter at her expense. One weekend, the school held a celebration to honor her. The auditorium was decorated with flowers and banners. The mayor gave a speech about courage, teachers spoke about respect, and parents shared stories of how their lives had changed. But the moment that touched Maya most was when little Amina stepped on stage, holding a small glass of clear water. She raised it high and said, "This water is life. And life was given back to us by Maya." The crowd rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Tears rolled down Maya's cheeks. She never imagined such a moment, not for herself, not for a woman once invisible in the kitchen. Later that night, after the celebration ended, Maya walked home under the stars. She sat on her porch, listening to the quiet hum of the night. Her notebook rested in her lap, its pages filled with her journey. She wrote slowly, "I was laughed at, but I did not stop. I was doubted, but I did not give up. What they called impossible was not impossible after all. It only waited for someone who believed." Closing the notebook, Maya leaned back and looked at the sky. She felt no anger toward those who had mocked her. Instead, she felt gratitude, for without their laughter, she might never have found the strength to prove herself. For the first time in many years, Maya felt complete. She was more than a lunch lady. She was a teacher, an inventor, and a reminder that greatness can rise from the most ordinary places. As the stars shone above, the sound of children's laughter echoed in the distance. This time, it was not cruel laughter, it was the music of joy, of health, of hope restored. And in that moment, Maya knew her story was not an ending. It was the beginning of many more lives touched, many more challenges to be solved, and many more hearts to be changed. For once, the world did not laugh at her. The world listened.